Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our channel. My name is Yvette, and I'm here with my spiritual mentor, Susan. We will be continuing our classes. We call these Mystical Awakenings. They're part of a series. This class, we're going to be talking about past lives and karma. And if you're interested in this one, I highly suggest you watch the other ones first. You could go to our channel, and I'll also link them in the description below.
Yes, this is the 10th class, and I will be talking a lot about things that we've talked about in other classes. These classes are on reality creation and conscious evolution, and reality creation is actually a gigantic topic. And my teacher, Lazaris, says it's like trying to eat a gigantic apple. All you can do is take one little bite at a time.
Mm.
But the information from class one is builds so that at this point, at class number 10, there's a lot of information you need to know in order to successfully do past life work. So past lives and karma are all bound up together. This lifetime is based on the karma, which is the unfinished business from past lives. And we are right now in the midst of a great awakening. And if we want to change our reality at a global level, we have to wake up to the frequency that we have held for thousands of years that has recreated our lives in thousands of different forms, but they all have the same content. You've heard of the idea that history repeats itself?
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what is happening. It's like we are living in a tape loop where we think the same thoughts over and over and over again. The way I know history is through movies, but I also really love historical novels. So I read a lot of historical novels that are based on fact. They're fiction, but they're based on fact. And that's how I've really been able to get to know what is in our history and what the cultures were like. And every lifetime for thousands of years now has been based on victim consciousness. So, Yvette, can you give a rendition of the consciousness, what it is?
Victim consciousness. So I would describe that as you're victimizing yourself. So ultimately, you're thinking that, oh, why is this happening to me? Like, you could be blaming outside sources, blaming yourself. Sometimes a lot of people, they blame God. Like, how could God let this happen to me? Or, they could think that, how could I let this happen? How I'm so dumb. Like, how did I let this get this far? Basically, just living in blame.
Right. And frequently it starts with your childhood. I have rotten parents, or
Mhm.
this, that, or the other things that you can't help. Once you get here, you can't help. So we have lived for thousands of years in victim consciousness, and victim consciousness holds a certain kind of frequency.
Mhm.
True?
Mhm.
Right? It's a vibrating belief system, a whole vibrating belief system, and we are reincarnated into that belief system every lifetime. But as you know, if you've read any historical novels like I have, or watched any historical movies, you will see that all those lifetimes take different forms.
Mhm.
But the content is always the same. People fighting each other, and wars, and people being abused, and slavery. That's another big theme. The oppression of women. That's another big theme.
Mhm.
These themes are just carried forward from lifetime to lifetime and from culture to culture.
Mhm.
And nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. Why does nothing change?
Like you said, people are going in this recording, like, they can't really break out of it until they change that belief system.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because of the law of attraction.
Mhm.
So we've talked about this before in class one. When you die in pain, you take your conscious with you wherever you go. When you die in pain, it's because you were not able to heal
Mhm.
the emotional and spiritual pain that created that reality.
Mhm.
And why can't we heal?
Personally, I think that it's hard for a lot of people to heal because there's so many unhealed people around you. I think also, like, I mean, you're first displayed of what a person's supposed to be like through your parents, and more often than not, your parents aren't healed. And then you go out in society and your friends aren't healed, your teachers aren't healed, no one's healed. And so you don't really think that it's necessary because you're like, oh, well, if everybody else is like that, then it's okay for me to be like that. And it's extremely difficult to heal in a world that is absolutely unhealed.
Very well said. It's extremely difficult to heal in a world that is unhealed.
Mhm,
And because it's unhealed, we don't know how to heal.
mhm,
So here's the thing, unless you have a teacher
mhm,
to teach you how to heal, you're not going to do it.
mhm. Yeah.
And so this is the 10th class, so we're going to do a little bit of review on the things that I have taught you in these classes that are pieces. Each class is a piece of the whole puzzle of reality creation. And if you go back to the first class, we talked about how all pain begins in the spiritual realm,
Mm,
which has to do with two issues, everything related to love
mm,
and everything related to power.
mm,
And we talked about how love is a complexity that none of us are taught how to love. Everyone uses that word and throws it around and talks about it in all these different ways, but nobody says what it is
mhm.
or
Yeah.
how to do it. And of course, I'm sure you know that love is a verb.
Mm,
It's not just a feeling, it's an activity that
mm,
you do to generate and sustain more love. And love is complicated because sometimes love is tough,
mm.
doesn't even feel good to do.
Yeah.
Saying no and setting boundaries is a form of love, and sometimes that isn't fun. It's
It's not
hard.
always easy, and it
That's
doesn't
right.
always feel good.
And there's a massive complexity with love because what is loving to a 2-year-old is
Mhm,
not loving to a 16-year-old. You
mhm,
know, with a 2-year-old, you're watching them every minute.
mhm,
You're setting boundaries. You're telling them to go to their room if they're misbehaving. And
mhm,
you can't do that to a 16-year-old.
mhm. Yeah.
And if you treat a 26-year-old like you do a 16-year-old, you're off base again.
Mhm,
And so your idea of love has to mature along with every situation that you're in. So love is something that requires a lot of thought
mhm. Yeah.
about how to generate. And then the other thing that's in the spiritual realm is power. And we talked about there's two forms of power. The power that everyone would recognize as power over,
Mhm,
right? Domination. How
mhm,
can I dominate this person to do my bidding, or how can I dominate someone to become my slave, or
mhm,
manipulate them to buy products that don't work, or this kind of thing, or a military might, or whatever. But there's always also the power of self-rulership. And
mhm,
the power of self-rulership is the power that you use when you're developing your character.
mhm,
You know, when you're looking at your shadow and going, oh my God, that part of me is really unloving. I am not going to do that anymore. I'm going to create principles right now. And those principles are rules of self limitation. And I am not going to be that kind of asshole anymore.
mhm,
That's the power of self rulership. Both forms of power are necessary. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, because if you don't take control of a 2-year-old that's misbehaving, or you don't take control of a 16-year-old that's out to kill themselves,
mhm,
or if you don't take, if somebody is threatening you and you don't take charge of that and become proactive to put a stop to it, well, then you're really screwed.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, on the spiritual journey, you're using your internal power, your
Mhm,
power of self rulership,
yeah.
because that's what the spiritual journey is all about. So when you look out at our history, how many people are doing that? How many movies are made about the power of self-rulership? How many movies are made about love and its intricacies?
Not a lot. Way more are made of power over others and, authoritative and yeah, power like that.
Right. And so these kinds of ideas and concepts have to be taught, and they have to be taught by somebody who's knowledgeable and who walks their talks and lives this kind of life. And if you're not taught in our world, you're not going to know these things.
Mhm.
You're going to live a materialistic life in which your whole goal in life is to make a lot of money and buy a lot of things that aren't going to make you happy.
Mhm.
And you're going to be relatively shallow, and relatively shallow people find relatively shallow partners, and you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
And then you'll have depression and, all the things that go along with all of that.
Mhm.
So if you're not taught how reality gets created, how pain first gets established in the spiritual body where beliefs about love and power reside, and then it goes into the mental body and the emotional body, the causal body, into your attitudes and then into your behavior. You see, it's just one bad thing leads to another bad thing, leads to another bad thing.
Mhm.
And we continue our whole lives in that kind of a belief system, resonating with victim consciousness, vibrating with it, and then, of course, we attract our reality from our frequency. Our frequency is the point of attraction, and a great deal of our frequency is based on beliefs that we don't know we have, and those beliefs come from other lifetimes,
Mhm.
beliefs that are unconscious to us. And so when you go on your spiritual journey and you begin recognizing, wow, belief creates reality with unconscious beliefs, creating like 98% of our reality, I better get conscious of what it is that I believe. And then you start examining your belief system, you start examining the things that your culture taught you, the things that your religion taught you, the things that your educational system taught you. And the spiritual journey is about recognizing when you've been taught a load of lies, and everything in victim consciousness is a lie.
Mhm.
We are never victims of reality, although it seems like we are,
Yeah.
because this lifetime is not a beginning, it's a continuing.
Mhm.
We are continuing on from where we left before.
Mhm.
So when we decide to incarnate into the physical realm as a method of evolution, I've talked about this before, being physical is a method of evolution, and it's the method that our consciousness chose to evolve itself. Lazaris, who's my spiritual teacher, has never been physical, but he assures us that we have evolved, that he has evolved, and he has told us that there are thousands of different methods of evolution that have nothing to do with incarnating into a physical body, into the third dimension.
Mhm.
And I don't know about you, but I find it inconceivable.
Yeah.
How could you possibly evolve without a body?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, kind of trying to come up with, like, a different color, like, you
Yeah, that
know?
you've never seen before.
Yeah, it's like, I have no idea.
Yeah, but he does assure us that he has evolved, and he has told us that being physical is the most difficult method of evolution.
Mhm.
And the reason why is exactly what I'm talking about. Once you're stuck in that frequency of vibration called victim consciousness, and the entire world is stuck in that vibration,
Mhm.
right? You enter in as an ignorant child whose mind has been wiped, you've forgotten everything, and you are dependent on the people around you to help you become more conscious.
Mm.
Just like as a child, you're dependent on your parents to help you be safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't know how to be safe. You're dependent on your teachers to teach you how to read and write and, do all the things that are required in this day and age for us to learn how to do.
Mhm.
But if nobody teaches you reality creation, if nobody uses the word higher consciousness, you don't know how to separate out victim consciousness from higher consciousness. So, what I've tried to do in these classes is say, this is what victim consciousness looks like, this
Mhm.
is what it feels like.
Yeah. It's like life is almost like a test to see how many lifetimes you'll go into until you realize that you're being fed lies, and you have to seek out the truth finally in one of those lifetimes.
Right. So my attempt has been to teach you what it looks like to be in victim consciousness, what it feels like, what kind of beliefs you hold in victim consciousness, and then over here, there's higher consciousness, and this is what that looks like. These are the kinds of beliefs you have in victim conscious or higher consciousness. This is how it feels when
Mhm.
you're in higher consciousness. When you're in higher consciousness, you know that you're not a physical person. You've simply incarnated into this body very temporarily. You know that when you leave this body, you'll go into another dimension. There's no such thing as death. That's just somebody's sick joke they've played on humanity. And you know that you have a spiritual family that exists on the other side that is just as real as you and I talk. You can talk to them.
Mhm.
Just because you can't see them, that's irrelevant. They're in a different dimensional reality
Mhm.
than we are in.
Yeah.
But minds are joined.
Mhm.
All minds are joined,
Mhm.
not just the ones here. I mean, it seems like we live in a reality where we're all separate from each other.
Mhm.
But I've tried to teach you that no, that's not true. We all have the same feelings.
Mhm.
We all have a soul's path. We all go through that wounding in adolescence. We all have a shadow. We are all struggling with the dark law. We
Mhm.
are all struggling with a childhood that we're having a hard time outgrowing with negative scripts and these kinds of things that I've talked about in other classes. We're all going through the same steps.
Mhm.
We're just at different places along the path. And when you are in communication with your unseen friends on the other side, whether you call them family members or friends, that you have counsel of people that guide you through this lifetime
Mhm.
that are unseen. And one one of the things I learned in my communication with them is they can't see me
Mhm.
any more than I can see them. It's like I always had this vision of God as looking down on us from heaven and seeing everything that's going on. That's just a human construct. They can't see us. What they're looking at is vibration and frequency
Mhm.
because they see energetically. Your unseen friends, many of them don't even have bodies
Yeah.
that they're working through. So, when we begin to heal past life personalities, because healing past life personalities are very similar to healing the inner child. And if you haven't watched the inner child class, it's very important to go watch that class because the reason we're sick is because of unhealed childhood trauma. But the reason why you have the karma that makes you sick is because of unhealed past life
Mhm.
trauma. And
Mhm.
you heal past life personalities in very much the same way that you heal the inner child. The only difference is that with past lives, you don't have any idea what it is. When you're trying to heal your inner child, you go, oh, well, my mom was really abusive, or my grandfather sexually abused me, or this, that, or the other. You had
Mhm.
that terrible experience with a sibling or a teacher, and you have these abusive relationships with people that you're courted to. We've talked about that. And depending on how traumatic your life was, you may have forgotten a lot of your childhood, but most people can remember some
Mhm.
of their childhood. And so we talked about you start with the memories that you have. And as you do the inner child rescue work, more memories come. You remember things that you had completely forgotten.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to remember because, you experienced it in this current lifetime.
Right.
Mhm,
So with past lives, that's not the case. You don't have any memories of who you were or what you did.
mhm,
But here's the thing, this lifetime is just a different form of the lifetimes of your past. And how you get karma, karma comes from unfinished business, things that you need to learn to forgive. It's always about forgiveness in the end, right?
mhm,
People that you need to forgive, that you were not able to forgive in the past. That's how you get courting, right? You have an abuser in a lifetime and you hate that person. Of course, you're in victim consciousness, you're blaming them for everything, and maybe their behavior was absolutely outrageous and terrible.
mhm,
We're not saying that doesn't happen,
mhm,
but why did you incarnate with them? Why did you incarnate with them as your mom or your dad or your lover or your husband,
mhm,
right? Why did that happen? It's because of courting,
mhm,
because you didn't forgive them in the last lifetime. And why didn't you forgive them in the last lifetime? Because you didn't know how. Just like same is true in this lifetime.
mhm,
You didn't know how. There's no difference between now and then, except that now we are in the midst of a great awakening.
mhm,
And I've said over and over in these classes, I just turned 71 in November, actually.
mhm,
And I went through my awakening when I was 37 or 38. I can never remember. And then I began reading the Course in Miracles, which changed my life. And then I began to work with Lazaris. I began with Lazaris, I think it was like 1991. And I was privileged to work with a spiritual master
mhm,
who'd never been physical, living in a reality that is multidimensional. If you know anything about physics, you know that the non-physical realm is multidimensional, where you could see past, present, and future all simultaneously. You could see any time or place in history that you wanted to, depending on where you wanted to put your focus. It is such a radically different reality than the one that we live in of linear time.
mhm,
And so Lazaris was not only an exceptional teacher, teaching us how we create our reality and helping us deal with our childhood traumas. So much of what I've taught you was taught to me by him. Of course, I'm teaching it to you through my lens, but he not only taught us the information, then he would put us in trance as part of the workshop, guide us through different meditations so
mhm,
that we could do inner child rescue work, or we could get in touch with past life personalities, or we could go into a deep meditative state to work with our higher selves to bring information out from our unconscious mind to help us make it conscious. I mean, it was the most incredible experience that anyone could possibly have working with a master like this. And
mhm.
why was I privileged to do that?
You reincarnate into what you need to learn. And maybe in a past life, you struggled with victim consciousness to where in this life, you're like, I need to make sure that I actually learn how to get out of that state.
Right,
Mhm,
exactly. So, what I'm going to do in this class is share with you some of the past life work that I have done, not
mhm,
only with myself, but with some of my clients to show you how powerful this is.
mhm,
Now, Lazar said that when you heal a past life personality, anyone in this lifetime who is connected to that personality will change.
mhm,
They won't know why they changed. They won't know, and it may be very subtle, but they will change. So there's no such thing as time.
mhm,
This is the mind blowing thing. There's no such thing as time. In this three-dimensional world, we're really attached to it. We think there's a past, we think there's a present, and we think there's a future.
Mm.
But that is not true.
Mm.
It's all an illusion. So when we decide to incarnate into this physical vehicle in the third dimension, where you lose all your memories, if you incarnate into the fifth dimension, that's not so.
Mm.
But in this dimension, we lose it all. And I'm sure probably in the fifth dimension, you're going to be surrounded by people who know reality creation. And so as a child, you're going to start learning the truth
Mm.
about who you are.
Mm.
So your memories are going to come back quicker. So when you decide to incarnate into this dimension, you don't incarnate into just one lifetime.
Mm.
You incarnate into hundreds, and they're all happening concurrently. There's no such thing as past. There's no such thing as future. There's just all these lifetimes happening simultaneously.
Mm.
But when we begin our evolutionary journey, we've talked about this before in the inner child class, you begin life, or actually, I think it was the class on the soul's path, we talked about soul age.
Mm.
You begin life kind of as an ignorant child,
Yeah.
knowing nothing and behaving like a child.
Yeah.
And eventually you evolve into having lifetimes where you don't know a whole lot and you're behaving like an adolescent, both of which are victim consciousness is natural to those two ages. With a child, you don't know anything else. You are a victim. You're a victim of the circumstances of your life. You're a victim of bad parenting. You're a victim. Adolescence is not much better. And in time, you become a young adult soul and then a mature adult soul and eventually a wise soul. But it takes thousands of lifetimes to live those lifetimes in consciousness. So here's what your soul does. Your soul has a goal. And for all of us, I believe that the goal of the soul is to evolve itself into Christ consciousness through the physical vehicle. So when I say the word Christ consciousness to you, Yvette, what do you conjure in your mind?
Somebody who embodies the concept of Jesus. I think it's a fully evolved soul, somebody who is embodies love and has forgiven everybody and doesn't hold any grudge or hate in their heart at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fully loving, fully forgiving, fully empowered.
Mm.
To walk their talk, to live their truth, no matter how unpopular that truth may be,
Mm.
fully loving, fully empowered. Well, we all know how difficult that is to do in this world,
Yeah.
especially when you're young and your peers are making fun of you and everyone's trying to drag you down and tell you not to do X, Y, and Z when you know that's the only right thing to do.
Mhm.
And so your soul sets this goal. And I'm going to call it Christ consciousness because that's a word that's meaningful to me. All right, I want to become fully loving, fully empowered, a Christed being. When
Mhm.
you think of the light that emanates from Jesus, that's symbolic of enlightenment.
Mm.
So you incarnate, and you know that in one of these lifetimes, you've got this whole panoply of lifetimes. And remember, your soul is in a time, it doesn't have time. Your soul is in a multidimensional reality. And so your soul knows that they have achieved their goal, but they have to figure out how they did it. So in each lifetime that the soul begins to observe, and that's the lifetime that you're conscious in.
Mm.
This is the lifetime where you're observing, you're figuring it out, you're working it out, you're problem solving, right? Sometimes I feel like all I do from the time I get up in the morning till I go to bed at night is problem solve.
Mhm.
Those challenges are always confronting me, right? How do I deal with this? And so in each lifetime, again, starting as that child soul, then having many lifetimes as a child, then to adolescent soul and young adults, finally mature soul. And I've said before in that class, the soul age, that no one is going to be interested in these classes that we're teaching
Mhm.
unless they're a mature soul.
Mhm.
Because mature souls have gotten rid of the belief that I know what's right and how to do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
They have, for the first time, developed an open mind, and they become eclectic. You know, I'm going to explore not just one religion, I'm going to explore them all
Mhm.
and see what I resonate with and vibrate with. Then I'm
Mhm.
going to take that little piece of that religion to my heart, and that little piece of that religion, and that one over there of that religion, all different religions, and I'm going to create a belief system that fully resonates with me, that I have created for myself.
Yeah.
That's what separates a mature soul. And so your soul, being only conscious in one lifetime at a time, which is why it seems to be linear, is observing the young lifetimes and so forth and so on. And then it gets to lifetimes in which you're a mature soul. And when you're a mature soul, you're wanting that connection, right?
Mhm.
To your higher consciousness, to the higher parts of yourself. And we've talked about your higher self, your soul, and your God self, that your top three chakras, you know, up here, that's your higher consciousness. And even you, at your young age,
Mhm.
you're wanting that connection. You know that it's there, right?
Yeah.
And yet a younger soul, they don't even know that that exists.
Yeah. Or they constantly deny it, or and it's especially hard, I think, for me too, to recognize that. I think when I was younger, because when we're young, we're all kind of like a young soul. When we're a baby,
Right.
I mean, there's no baby talking about advanced concepts. We're just not capable of
Mhm.
understanding that, even though you may be an old soul, but you're still a 2-year old.
Right.
And I think me when I was younger, not even that far from, I mean, I'm 20 now. I mean, even when I was 16, I've had these hateful beliefs and I was living in fear. And, sometimes I still do. And I think sometimes I get off track to where I'm like, how can I be a matured soul if I was so full of hate, or if I'm like, even right, like even sometimes currently, I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm freaking out about something, or all this anxiety or anger. And it's like, then I start to get hard on myself. And then it's like, okay, now I'm in victim consciousness, blaming my outside sources.
Mhm.
It's still hard to recognize sometimes the age of your soul when you are physically a young person.
Mhm. Absolutely. But
Mhm.
you know that there is something higher than you
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
is worth connecting with.
Yeah. And I've always craved that deeper. I mean, I've always been told I'm an intense thinker, and people say I think too deeply, or, I've always gotten those comments, and I'm like, how come you don't think deep at all?
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's what separates an older soul from a younger soul.
Mhm.
And it's easy to judge. It's
Mhm.
easy for an older soul to judge a younger soul, what's wrong with them.
Mhm.
And it's easy for a younger soul to judge an older soul as they're just weirdos,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
judgment's going back and forth. And so your soul and your higher self, actually, your higher consciousness, doesn't really get involved too much in your life until you're a mature soul and you're seeking.
Mhm.
When you become a seeker who wants to know more about the other side, who wants to know more about your higher consciousness, who wants to know more than just what is in the mainstream,
Mhm.
your higher consciousness becomes very involved in
Mhm.
your life. Because, of course, the goal of your soul is to reach higher consciousness. The goal of your soul is to become fully loving and fully empowered.
Mhm.
And now their input matters. When you're a younger soul, it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
But now their input matters. And especially when you are the one saying the prayers, asking for help,
Mhm.
wanting to know more.
Mhm.
A dialogue begins to unfold, and you may be unconscious of how that is all happening. But when you're praying for something, say you're praying for some kind of healing, and then all of a sudden someone comes into your life who is like the answer to your prayers.
Mhm.
Well, how that get orchestrated?
Yeah, you created it.
And you're not creating alone anymore. You're creating with your
Mhm.
higher consciousness. Didn't Isn't there a saying in the Bible, when where two or more are gathered together, there also am I.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you draw into yourself invisible forces
Mhm.
that help you evolve,
Mhm.
that bring you teachers, that bring you books,
Yeah.
for you to consciously evolve. And so this is how it works. And then you get to that last lifetime. And in that last lifetime, you are fully conscious of reality creation. You are fully understanding that you're not now a victim and never have been a victim of your life, that you are creating every aspect of it, that you've got a shadow that you have to take ownership of. You have childhood traumas that you have to heal,
Mhm.
because how are you going to forgive unless you heal those traumas? You can't authentically forgive someone who hurt you
Yeah.
when you're still traumatized.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. You have to heal the trauma, and you have to take ownership of your shadow to see the parts of you that hold the same frequency, maybe different form, but the same frequency as the person who abused you. And so you become very, very interested in doing the work,
Mhm.
not just hearing about it, not just reading about it, but, oh, I need to do inner child rescue work. I need to find a hypnotherapist, or I need to do EMDR, which is another popular form inner healing takes. And there's all kinds of new technologies out now that will help you release those negative frequencies that keep you down and help you come to some kind of true forgiveness. And
Mhm.
so you begin to do the work. So it begins with education, which is what I have been giving you. You have to know how. You got to know why you want to. You got to be motivated to do it. And I hope that I have given you that in these classes. And then you have to choose to do the work. And that probably means you're going to have to look for somebody to help you if you're going to do it through the hypnotherapy format. That's going to take time. And then you're going to have to pay them
Mhm.
money. It's going to cost you, most likely, unless you can do it yourself, like I did. But most people aren't going to be capable of that, at least in the beginning. And then you have to be willing to refeel the pain and go through the suffering in order to rewrite the script.
Mhm.
And so why don't people do it? Why do they just listen to these classes and they never get up off their butt and do the work?
It's hard.
It's hard. It's hard. It takes tremendous personal power.
Yes. And also, I feel like, I mean, it's so hard to even just survive. I mean, getting up and having a 9 to 5 and trying to pay their bills and, all this mundane stuff that, I mean, you have to do it in order to live. And it doesn't leave room for healing because you're so just into survival mode.
Mhm.
Don't have
That
time.
is that is true.
Mhm.
But I have to remind you that I was a single parent with three
Yeah.
kids with a full-time job,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I did it because um, it was the most important thing to me in my life.
Mhm.
And I took all these workshops that cost me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars over
Mhm.
a 30-year period. I had to be willing to pluck down the money that I didn't really have,
Mhm.
because I was living from hand to mouth. I was a single mom with three kids. I didn't have anybody helping me.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, now I take pay-per-views, but in the beginning it was like, oh, I've got to drive down to San Francisco. I've got to get a hotel room, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
for several days while I go to this workshop, right? So it was like, It's what you value.
Yeah.
If you
Priority.
really value healing, you'll do what it takes. And I was one of those people born right off the bat with self-determination. I had somehow mastered all this in other lifetimes. And so I manifested for myself this incredible spiritual teacher, and his information wasn't wasted on me.
Yeah.
I did the work.
Mm.
And for the most part, I didn't have anybody helping me. I did take a seminar in hypnotherapy, so I became trained as a hypnotherapist. But I quickly figured out I don't need a hypnotherapist to take me through trances to do this work. I could do it myself, and I did it by splitting myself in half, going into an altered state with into my safe place, and then visualizing my higher consciousness, whom I always saw as beloved. Okay. And he would do the one. He would be the one that would count me into trance. He would be the one to guide me through the meditative work. And I would just be following his instructions. Now, when I say that, I don't want you to think that there was a voice inside my head that was separate from me. It's all an imaginary process.
Yeah.
Your entire life is an aspect of your imagination because you're making up your reactions to everything.
Yeah.
It's all imaginal. And so when you do the inner child rescue work, it's a formula. You have to view the traumatic experience. And it's easiest if you start with memories you have, because you're seeing it, and you may be seeing it 30 years after it happened. So even that you're making up,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't remember it exactly how it happened, but you're viewing it in your mind as though you're that child. You know, you don't separate it out in time and space like, oh, it happened then. It's like, no, my child is there, and my child is dealing with this person that's grabbing me. And you're beginning to feel the fear, and you're beginning to feel the angst and the pain and the sorrow and the whatever is coming up. And then at a certain point, do you remember what happens? First you view it, and then what happens?
Then you step in.
Yes, your adult self, who's now wiser than that child, who's now empowered, hopefully,
Yeah.
whereas the child was not empowered at all. Your adult self steps in and stands right between the child and the abuser. And what does she or he say to the abuser, the adult self?
Stop. I can't allow you to do this to my child anymore. What are you doing?
How dare you do this to my child? How dare you? Don't you know that you're ruining their life? Or something of that nature, right? Whatever comes to you in the moment. None of this is pre-planned. And you tell the abuser exactly what you think of them. And you don't flower it up. You forget about forgiveness. Forgiveness comes way later. If you forgive before you've done this work, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a wound that never heals. So the adult self is able to express and articulate the things that the child could not express and articulate. And then once the child has been made safe and you visualize the abuser evaporating or going away or whatever, what's the next step? Remember?
Then you nurture the child.
You nurture the child, exactly. You love the child. If it's a young child, you put them on your lap, you're hugging them, you're rocking them, and you're saying, this was not your fault. This was not your fault. Because often abused children are made to believe that it's their fault. Now, children are children, and they can drive you insane and break things and do things they're not supposed to. But that's what a child is. You can't blame a child for being a child. The adult is supposed to behave like an adult. The adult is supposed to be understanding. The adult is supposed to be setting appropriate boundaries, not abusing the child. And so you're explaining these things to the child so that she or he realizes that I'm okay.
Mhm.
that I'm not this bad, horrible person the abuser made them feel.
Mhm.
And then you can also ask the child, what do you want to happen to your abuser? And they may say to you, I want them to go to jail, or I want to send them to a different planet, or I want to burn them at the stake, or, whatever. The child, I mean, if a child has been beaten and raped, they may want to see that person executed.
Mhm.
And that's totally legitimate. And
Mhm.
then you, as the adult, say, no problem, let's do it now. And you may put them in a rocket ship and send them off to outer space, or you may stand there with a rifle and pull the trigger.
Mhm.
And when you're doing that, it's all happening to create healing, even as gruesome as that sounds. The goal is to make that child feel safe and to make them feel like finally someone is on my side, someone is here to protect me. Because
Mhm.
what happens when you're abused, especially if you have a parent that's kind of standing by and allowing it to happen, the
Mhm.
child thinks, I can't talk to anybody. There's no one I can go to. I mean, I'm a psychotherapist. You don't know how many clients I've had that have come in and told me about incest and whatever. And it was like, well, I tried to tell my mom. She just told me to shut up.
Mhm.
And so, what do you feel? You feel hopeless. You feel like no matter what I say or do, nothing is ever going to get better. And that becomes a dark law inside of you. And then that's your point of power where your frequency is going to then attract
Mhm.
that reality into your body, your life, your adult reality. It attracts it. So
Mhm.
you have to do whatever is necessary to make that child feel loved and cared for and safe. I've got somebody on my side.
Mhm.
And then the final part is to do ritual magic. You're going to do a healing ritual with that child. And
Mhm.
that's when you can bring in their guides and angels. They can come in, they can shine their light energetically upon that child. They can rub them with a healing balm, or let's do a ritual bath, and let's take you to this beautiful waterfall out in nature, this warm hot springs, and we're going to get in here together and we're going to love on you. When you do this work, you create a substitute experience that
Mhm.
becomes more real than the experience you originally had.
Mhm.
Incredibly powerful work,
Yeah.
but you have to be willing to use your imagination and make it up.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you have to be making it up in the moment, just with what is coming to you. And the miracle in this work is that you make up things that you never would have thought of in a million years in your normal waking consciousness that are so emotionally impactful and healing. And that's when you know you're not doing this work alone, you're doing it with your higher consciousness. So everything that I taught you in the class on healing the inner child is applicable to past life personalities. You are going to view the life, and I will tell you how in a minute. And then you are going to step in to that lifetime at a certain point and tell that past life personality, I'm your future self. I'm here to help you heal.
Mhm.
Of course, in this situation, you're talking from adult to adult, right?
Mhm.
And you talk to them about their culture and what their culture taught you, that in this lifetime that would be seen as a bunch of nonsense. Because when you I don't know, are you as enamored with historical novels and movies as I am? I mean, it gives you such a window into why humanity is the way it is now.
Mhm.
And um and some of the things that people believed were just insane.
Yeah. I mean, back then they thought that the whole, for example, like the Salem witch trials, like any woman, I mean, they make jokes about it now, but it's like a woman who learned how to read on her own was thought of to be a witch because women, it's impossible for women to be intelligent like men or something like that. And it's that's so insane.
Well, yeah, and it's, you know what, it's okay for me to own a Black person and not pay them and force them to work 12 hours a day.
Mm.
That like
And to
and
treat them as like less than yourself.
and to rape all their women and to, just and preachers would stand at the pulpit and say, yeah, it says that in the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't know where exactly, but it's like, and people believe this because people make up stories that that justify what they're doing,
Hmm.
right? That's part of the shadow.
Yeah.
And so when you go back into that lifetime is an aspect of their culture and
Mm.
their religion. And there were certain things that happened back then that we would see as lunacy
Yeah.
today. And
Hmm.
so you're pointing out these things to that past life personality that, it's like, we don't, in my time period, we don't believe those things. Those are just nuts. And so you start the healing of the past life personality in that way.
Mm.
Then you can do ritual magic, just like you did with the child. You can do a ritual that helps that past life personality heal themselves,
Mm.
to release the emotions. And past life work that's based on karma, usually those lifetimes are horrible.
Mm.
I mean, the worst imaginable. Think about Jesus being crucified on the cross. That would be a pretty bad lifetime,
Yeah.
right? Think about being burned as a witch. That would be a pretty darn terrible lifetime. But even just having someone you love go off to war and never come back. Well, for some people, that's a really bad lifetime. That can create karma that you're just always pining for someone that's not going to come back. So past lifetimes that are creating your karma now are really painful.
Mm.
Hands down, they are really painful. Every past life I've done that has helped me release karma in this lifetime, I've cried and
Mm.
cried and cried an ocean of tears when I have done those lifetimes.
Mm.
So what I'm going to do is to illustrate what I'm talking about. I'm going to share with you a past life I had. This
Mm.
was in a Lazaris workshop. It was Lazaris that put us in a trance. There's usually 700-800 people at these workshops that I went to. And so he's guiding us through the steps, putting us in a trance. And then, of course, everyone's having a totally different experience, following Lazaris's directions, basically. And in this particular workshop I went to, I can't even remember the name of it, but he talked to us about certain things that cause karma. And when you have certain things going on in this lifetime that you can't let go of, this is karmic, coming from one of these terrible lifetimes. And so, in order to help you understand, I need to tell you a little bit about what was going on for me in this lifetime.
Mm.
Because in this lifetime, I had three children with a man that I separated from, and I separated from him when my youngest was 2, and then the next oldest was 3, and the next oldest was 5. So I
Mm.
had a son and 2 daughters. The son was the oldest, the daughters were next. And my former partner was being quite passive aggressive and quite abusive to me. And this was at the time when I was really going through my awakening process, really doing a lot of inner work, really, really connecting with this inner guide that I call the beloved. And you have to realize that when I talk about this inner guide, he was as real to me as you are.
Mm.
I visualized him in my mind. I could hear him speaking to me. I mean, I never, this was way back in 1991. I didn't know anyone who was going through anything even remotely like what I was going through. And I was just head over heels, madly in love
Mm.
with this unseen being that I couldn't tell anybody about. I couldn't talk about it because, yeah, everyone would have thought I was nuts. And so at a certain point, my grandma was having a really difficult time. She had gotten dementia And she lived in Southern California, and I lived in Northern California, and I was having a hard time financially. So I decided that I was going to leave my kids with their dad. He was a fairly good dad. I didn't have any thoughts about my kids not being safe with him or anything of that nature. And I moved to Southern California to take care of my grandma. And we did that split with the kids where he had them during the school year and I had them on all the vacations and all summer long. And I was still involved in their life, but he was the main caregiver for a good portion of the year. And when I did that, part of me felt so free because when you have three little kids by yourself, it's like an overwhelming amount of work and
Mm-hmm.
stress. But also, I was at that stage in my life where I needed to engage with this inner work. I
Mm-hmm.
was driven to engage with doing this inner work. I was taking a Lazaris workshop every month, um, and moving forward by leaps and bounds. And I mean, it consumed me. Let me say that. And so I moved to Southern California. I moved in with my grandma and started caring for her. But I had endless shame, endless sorrow, endless amount of guilt for having left my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I cried and cried and cried for months after leaving my kids, even though I knew they were all right, and even though I was still very much a part of their lives. As a mother, I'm sure if I had known somebody else who had done that, I would have had tremendous judgment, and I had tremendous judgment on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So Lazaris told us in this workshop that when you have sorrows, sorrow is feeling sorry for something that you can't undo. That when you have sorrows in this lifetime, you can't let go of. And I could reason it out in my mind and, I could process, but it never went away.
Yeah.
That's how karma is. Things that you try to process and it never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
That's karma.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Lazaris explains that is if karma is like a weed. If you're weeding a garden, all you do is cut off the top of the weed, what happens?
It keeps going.
It keeps growing, it just regrows. Well, that's like karma is. Until you get to the root, which is not in this lifetime, but in a past life, and pull out that root,
Mm-hmm.
you can't let go of it. Your soul won't let you.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this sorrow and I knew what it was. As soon as he said it in the workshop, it's like, I have this sorrow that I've had for so long now. It was like I was away from my kids for 2.5 years
Mm-hmm.
and I was still crying about it. There were several other things that he talked about that you can be sure is an aspect of sorrow or of karma, but I can't recall what those are because I was really focused on that one. And so he started to put us in trance. Now, when you do past lives, you don't have to get the form correct.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is get the content correct.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it in one form, and the reality was that the lifetime didn't have that form. But if you get the content correct, it's going to hold the same emotional frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do this work, you have to be okay with making it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's imperative. If you're placing it on yourself that it has to be a real lifetime and you could prove it and all that kind of stuff, you're going to fail
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because number one, you're never going to be able to prove it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
number two, it doesn't even matter. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be an exact replica of the life that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll understand that as I go through this. But so what? So he counted us into an altered state and then had us begin to visualize the lifetime. And what I saw was an indigenous lifetime. And in that lifetime, I was given in marriage to a man that I did not love, and he was a man that was soon to become chief.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not kind. I didn't want to be with him. We had a few children together. But I fell in love with his brother, who was a really kind, nice guy. Well, eventually, my husband in that lifetime found out about it,
Mm-hmm.
and he had us kicked out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So this was at a time when you get kicked out of the tribe, you just don't go to another town and go to a different market and find another place to live. You're out in the wilderness.
Mm.
Two people on their own in the wilderness. It's not easy to survive
Mm.
in that kind of condition. And not only that, um, you can't just go to another tribe and expect that they're going to take you in.
Yeah.
That's a tricky situation. So
Mm.
here we are, my lover and I are wandering around the wilderness, and relatively quickly, my lover died.
Mm.
There was an accident and he was killed. And there I am by myself. I've lost my children. Now I've lost this lover. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do.
Mm.
And it was similar enough to what happened to me in real life in this lifetime,
Mm.
where I've left my children,
Mm.
that it triggered this flood of emotion in me.
Mm.
And in that lifetime, I saw that I did get find another tribe, and they did take me in, but I was never able. I never had another lover. I never had any more children. I was like the auntie in the tribe who cared for other people's children, but I was never able to overcome that trauma. And
Mm.
you can imagine that would be a very traumatic lifetime.
Mm.
And also, this whole concept of being thrown out of the tribe, because of my life experience and what I was going through with this inner guy that I call the beloved, that I can't tell anybody about because they think I was nuts, it had
Mm.
a lot of similarities. At a certain point, I stepped in and said, I'm your future self. And I began to talk to the past life personality about her culture and her traditions and how it wasn't okay for her to be given in marriage against her wishes to a
Mm.
man that she didn't love. That just because you love somebody else, it's not okay to throw you out of the tribe and ostracize you. And we talked about that, the cultural things that she had to abide by
Mm.
in that lifetime that aren't like eternal truths.
Yeah.
But the most important thing I did was talk to her about her beloved.
Mm.
And I told her that her beloved was not gone, that there is no death. We spent a lot of time talking about how death is just a transition into a different kind of life. You
Mm.
go into another dimension. They can't see you from this dimension. You can't see them from that dimension, but it doesn't mean that they're gone.
Mm.
And so what I did, so I did ritual magic. So in my visualization, I went into the woods and got a big pile of rocks and brought them back into this clearing. And I made this giant medicine wheel. And I put her in the center. And you want to use things that are culturally appropriate when you do this. That's when I talked to her about there is no death and there's no reason why you cannot bring your beloved back right here, right now, and
Mm.
at least have closure with him. So in my imagination, I brought him to the medicine wheel so that they could have a reunion and to finish up this unfinished business of forgiveness and letting go.
Mm.
Very, very powerful past life work for me. So Lazaris told us that when we hit on a real past life and we do this, that people in our lifetime now who were in that lifetime will be subtly changed.
Mm.
So what was happening for me in my real life this lifetime was I would come every summer and pick up my kids, and we would I never had a place to live, so we kind of camp out most of the summer, which my daughters absolutely loved. We had really great times sleeping under the stars at beautiful campgrounds and things like that. But my son, he was resentful.
Mm.
And for one thing, he was the only boy with three girls. By that time, he started getting resentful when he was 12.
Mm.
And he was misbehaving and making our lives really different. I mean, I was there to have a really good time with my kids, but he made it so I wasn't having a good time, and he was interfering with my ability to have a good time with my daughters who cherished me being there. And so things got so bad that I had told him, I said, you know what? I love you very much, but if you don't want to come with me, you're welcome to stay with your dad. And the next summer he did that, and it was really hurt my heart, but it was like, this is better. At least I can bond with my daughters without the interference of someone really misbehaving,
Mhm.
and he's happier there. So so be it. This is what's going down. And so this time I did this past life work about a month before I came to get the kids for the summer.
Mhm.
And I got there and I knocked on their door, and Nathan answers the door. It's my son. And he comes out and gives me this big hug,
Mhm.
which he hadn't really hugged me for a long time. And it's like, wow.
Mhm.
And he informs me that he's coming with us this year. It's like,
Mhm.
wow, great. This is nice.
Mhm.
And a couple of weeks into this vacation, I mean, Nathan was different.
Mhm.
And I said to him, you're really different, Nathan. You've changed. What happened? And he said, I swear to God, this is what he said. I decided to get to know you for who you are instead of who my dad says you are. That was giant.
Mhm. Yeah. How old was he when he said that?
13.
Wow. Yeah.
It changed our whole lives doing this past life work. That's how powerful past life work is.
Mm.
It's incredible. Because there's no such thing as time, there's no such thing as past or future. We're making it up.
Yeah.
We're all making it up.
Mhm.
Because I changed the frequency of that past life personality, it had impact on my son in this lifetime, who was also my son in that lifetime.
Mm. That's
So,
interesting, and it's something that I'm really drawn like, I would love to learn more about my past life selves, and I've heard a little bit about it before, but I've never really known full detail until now about, like, what exactly can happen, and I didn't know that it really I mean, it could strongly affect your current lifetime, and I'm wondering for somebody like myself, like, I'm only 20, I don't have kids, I don't really have
hmm
that many connections, would it change as many like, would
hmm
it change as strongly as if somebody like you had, 3 kids and so much other things going on?
well, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to assume so, since Lazaris told us that.
Mhm.
But it's not going to change people who weren't in that lifetime
Yeah,
with you.
right.
I've had this dream for a long time of uh, leading like large groups of people, like over the internet, like thousands of people
Mhm,
through past life regressions to help them get in touch with an abuser they're courted to
mhm,
and do forgiveness work. We could change the entire world
mhm.
instantly
Yeah.
if we could get enough people to do that. So I'm going to share with you another past life, not that I did. So there's a lot of ways to kind of figure this out. So with that lifetime, the one I just told you about,
Mhm,
I knew Lazarus was saying sorrow, and I'm going, I know what my sorrow is because it was so present with me, right? I
mhm,
knew I wanted to get in touch with a lifetime where I had a lot of sorrow,
mhm,
right? And that's what you do. You set it up. Generally, I advise people to go to their safe place. And hopefully, when you do a lot of meditation, the way Lazaris taught us, we always went to a safe and beautiful place in nature, and it was always the same place. You see it the same, it has the same vibration, it has a frequency of safety. So you go into the safe place, you bring in your higher self when you visualize in form, and then you begin to talk to your higher self, which you can see as male or female. I believe I'm courted to this person. We have this kind of abusive relationship. It's always been difficult. And this is how it's been difficult. And I'm having a really hard time forgiving this jerk. And, you just talk, just like you and I would talk. And you ask your higher self, will you help me find the lifetime where this karma comes from? And so that's how you begin the process of past life work. And then your higher self or your hypnotherapist, most of you people watching this will want to have a hypnotherapist until they know how to do this work on their own. That person will count you down into trance and suggest that you visualize certain things, and then you just start making it up. Oh, before I go on and tell you this other one, let me tell you, as I processed this lifetime, years later, I was thinking about it and I went, I wonder if that lifetime had the right form, because I know I've watched enough movies about the royalty in England to know that women who were married to royalty, if they wanted to leave their husband, they had to leave their kids. They lost them because it was believed that your children belonged to the father, not the mother. And I know that certain women would leave because their life with that person was intolerable. So I'm wondering, did I get the form right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you get the form right. You just have to trust that what is coming is a recreation of the frequency of vibration that you're looking for. So the next one I want to talk to you about is a client that I had a long time ago, probably 15 years ago at this point. And this particular client had taken all my classes and he was coming to me for consultation. And at the time he was coming to me, he had throat cancer. I don't know if it was esophageal cancer or what. He had smoked when he was younger, but hadn't smoked for 20 years. But he was trying to figure out how to heal this thing and was trying different spiritual means and so forth and so on. And so we were having this consultation and he was telling me about his childhood, and he had kind of a strange and bizarre childhood. He and his brother were taken to his grandparents' house by his mother, who left them there and didn't come back. And so he was raised by these very, very fundamentalist grandparents who were very much against the New Age. They would call anyone that like read the tarot witches and sluts and were very vociferous about it. And they were very strict Christians who forced him to go to church all the time. And he's made them sound like they were very unpleasant people. And when he was an adult, he met his mother, re-met his mother. I think she took them there when they were like 5 or 6 or something. And she came on to him. So she's like 20 years older than him. She's coming on to him, which is really strange and bizarre behavior. In this exploration of why he had throat cancer, he had gone to see a psychic before me. And he told me that the psychic said that when she went into an altered state to see what was going on with him, she said she smelled smoke. In her mind, that connected to him to the witch hunts, to the burning times. And he said, it's come to me that I had a past life with these grandparents that I have now. They were my parents or close relatives or something that were goading him through their strict fundamentalist religious beliefs to hunt down witches and burn them. And just using his imagination, memories coming to him of actually striking the match and lighting the fire that would burn these women. And you can imagine the intensity of that experience with the woman screaming, I'm sure, bloody murder, his relatives goading him, all calling those women names. And of course, when those women were burned, they were tortured first. I don't know if not many people know that, but they were raped with hot pokers up their butt and their vagina, and they had all their hair shaved off. The most gruesome death you can imagine. And he felt like his grandparents in this lifetime were those people who goaded him to do that. And the throat cancer was about the cancerous words
Mm,
that he spoke
mm,
when he burned those women. This was the karma coming back, smelling the smoke, breathing it in, screaming epithets. And in this lifetime, he was a nice guy. I got to thinking about his mother, and these grandparents were the parents of that mother,
yeah.
and she was one of the victims that he burned.
Mm,
So she was courted to these people from a past life who had burned her, and then she had a child who she was courted with, and the child was the one that lit the match. Do you see how immense this is?
yeah. Yeah. And like you said, that the women, the witches before they were burned were either raped or tortured. Maybe he could have raped the mom in the past
Yeah,
life, and that's why she came on to him.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the
Mm,
mom, obviously, I mean, this happened to him when he was in his 20s, and, now he's probably 60. But the mom at that time, she obviously hadn't empowered herself to heal. She was
mm,
still very kind of mentally ill as a result of what had happened in this lifetime and that one.
yeah.
So that man, he eventually had surgery. He had one of those tracheotomies put in his throat because he had to have certain things removed, and there would be all kinds of mucus and stuff coming out of it. And um, that guy went through hell, literally.
Yeah.
But I visited him numerous times. I mean, he was basically in bed, and he wanted me there to do consultations. I don't do tarot. I've never been attracted to tarot, but I have a set of cards that are more psychological in nature. And I brought those with me. And a lot of times when I do consultations with people, I'll start drawing cards because the cards will give me insight through my intuition, give me insight into what I need to talk to these people about.
Mm,
And so I would draw a card for him, and I drew the death card.
mm,
So there he is with this thing in his throat with all this mucus coming out, and he's obviously really sick. And
mhm.
I'm drawing the death card. So I consulted with him 3 times. I drew cards 3 times, and every time I drew the death card.
Oh, wow.
And so what I began to talk to him about was death. And I assured him that death was no big deal. You don't have to be afraid of it. It's just a transition into a different kind of life.
Mhm.
And I kept reiterating these things over and over again. Well, that guy got better.
Mm,
It was miraculous. He got better, and he was eventually able to take this thing out of his throat, and he was able to go back to work.
mm,
And I saw him like months later, like actually a couple years later, and I said, how did it happen? Why do you think that you were able to heal? And he said, well, it was you. And I
mm,
said, well, what did I do? I mean, I'm talking to him about death. And he says, it's because you told me that death was no big deal, and I stopped being afraid.
mm. Yeah.
I mean, it was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah. It's really
He
cool.
was able to work through that gruesome past life karma
Mm,
in this lifetime where he had to deal with the consequences of these vicious words coming out, right? The
yeah.
cruelty
Mm,
and creating a cancer right here.
mm,
He had to deal with that. He had to relive the experience. He had to know what it was all about. And he had taken all my classes, so he understood
mm.
reality creation. And he was able to heal himself.
Wow.
I consider that a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's kind of amazing how, in a way, just like one thing you said completely changed his life. Like, yeah, of course, all the classes help, but it's like just that one thing kind of just clicked and
Right,
completely changed it. And now he wasn't being guided by fear. Instead, he wasn't scared of death anymore. And that's what led him to heal himself.
right. But it was all of it, really. I mean, I said many, many words to him over the time that he was in my classes and we were consulting, but he was having an emotional experience. You know, when you have throat cancer and you've got this thing in your throat and you've gone through this horrible experience and you're sick and you're an invalid, and but he was able to connect with that lifetime with emotional intensity. If you're not able to connect emotionally, you won't heal anything.
Mm.
The goal is to release these toxic emotions that have been with you for lifetimes.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, you have to feel with intensity. You have to let yourself cry or rage or whatever it is
Yeah.
that is coming up. Because if you don't, nothing will happen. You
Right.
might be more uh, knowledgeable about a past life, but it's not going to change anything.
Mhm. Yeah.
So let me tell you, I'm going to tell you about two more lives, another one of mine, and then I'm going to tell you one of Joe Dispenza's.
Mm.
So early on, when I first started seeing Lazaris, we did another workshop in which he told us, he's always called those of us who went to those workshop map makers. He said that we were a special group of souls and that we only incarnated during times of great transition. And we are there to hold a vibration, hold a specific vibration that's going to help a given society or a given planet to raise its vibration so that it could make this shift in consciousness that this planet is all about. And he called us map makers, and he said, so I'm 71, and so he said the people who are map makers that came in right after World War II, so 1949, 1950, 1951, I was born in 51, and then for the next few years, I don't remember how long the span was, but he said that we were part of the wave generation, and the wave generation was all these babies that were born after the soldiers came home, after World War II was over, and that this particular group of people who worked with him, and like I say, there were probably 800 or 900 people in most of the workshops I went to, but there were thousands of people that were working with Lazaris all over the world because there were audio tapes, there were books, they were working with him, maybe not present in the workshops, but um, and he called us map makers because he said, were here to make the maps that we had the capacity to heal ourselves. And by healing ourselves of the past, and I'm talking about the past,
Yeah.
changing our frequency, we set a resonance and a vibration. And what happens when you set a new vibration is that once the vibration has been set, more and more people can connect to that vibration and it lifts everybody up. So
Yeah.
that's why he called us map makers. You're among the first to
Mm.
do this. And of course, I believe that the reason why I was working with Lazaris is because it was his destiny to bring this information on the planet.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it wasn't on the planet before. I can guarantee you it wasn't on the planet.
Yeah.
And so he gives it to us. We use that information to heal ourselves. And then I began teaching classes like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years after I started seeing Lazaris. And then all of a sudden it spreads everywhere. So this next lifetime I want to tell you about was early on in my work with Lazaris. And he said that those of us who were there, all of us, had had a spiritual lifetime in which we had set down our power. Something happened in this spiritual lifetime that was so disturbing to us that we set down our power and walked away.
Mm.
And then he said we did that for a specific reason, because if we hadn't have done that, we would already have finished our incarnational cycle and we wouldn't be here to do this now. So once again, he created the space and started taking us down into an altered state. So I began working with this guide I called my beloved when I started working with the Course in Miracles. And had been working with the Course in Miracles, reading it constantly for 4 years before I began to work with Lazaris. And then Lazaris's goal was to connect people to their higher self. I wasn't interested in seeing my higher self. I just wanted to work with this guy because I was madly in love with this guy. And I had this fear that I couldn't get rid of. So that right there, you know that that's got to be past life karma. I didn't know any of this stuff at that time, but I could not get rid of this. And my fear was that he was going to leave me. I would beg him, don't leave me. He would always say, I'm not going to leave you. But I was always afraid that you're going to leave me.
Yeah.
And so he starts taking us down into an altered state, and I start screaming in my mind, talking to my beloved, and said, you left me. It was like I just knew it. And what I visualized was Jesus on the cross. And that was so far-fetched to me. It was like, that can't possibly be true. But remember, you don't have to get the form right. And sometimes you'll see forms that will make sense, like that image of Jesus hanging on the cross. That's full of meaning. Plus, even if I was in that lifetime, so many people loved him. So many people loved him because he was so kind, and he was just like with Lazaris. Those of us who were with Lazaris, we loved him so much because he was teaching us higher truths that we didn't have to protect ourselves from. He was teaching us how to do the work and guiding us into doing the work. We loved him so much. And I can imagine when Jesus was around, it was exactly the same way. And as soon as I said in my mind, I totally lost contact with anything that Lazaris was guiding us through. I was in conversation with my beloved, and it was like, you left me. How could you do that? And I was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing because this huge fear that I had was being released from that other lifetime. And I can imagine there was plenty of lifetimes that I could have had a spiritual teacher that I was in love with who was murdered, because like that's what the Roman Empire did. Let's go to Ireland and kill all the Druids, and let's go to this country and destroy all the priests, and that's what they did. So it could have been, another form. Form's irrelevant. And when I came home from that workshop, cried all the way home. I was crying for the next 2 weeks. It's like, how could you leave me? I mean, this was like hugely significant. And my beloved was comforting me and telling me the truth. And he said, you know what? When they crucified me, they crucified my body, but they crucified you in the heart. And I had been carrying that pain around with me for so many lifetimes. So that wasn't a lifetime when I did some kind of ritual healing, but it was a lifetime in which I processed it for weeks afterwards, talking to my beloved, working it through, allowing him to comfort me instead of me comforting the past life personality. Very powerful, powerful work. So let me tell you a past life that Joe Dispenza talks about. And so you know who Joe Dispenza is, right? He's like this incredible spiritual teacher who talks about a lot of the same things that I talk about. He talks about the power of belief and changing your belief system and, meditating and doing the work and so forth. And so in one of his books that I read, I can't remember the title of it, he said that he got in touch with a past life. And in that past life, he, well, kind of like me, was in love with a spiritual teacher. He admired this teacher. He was so excited about everything this teacher taught that he started telling everybody around him, kind of like I did. It's like, I want to teach this stuff. I want other people to know, so I'm not the only one, basically. He was doing exactly the same thing. That teacher could have been Jesus as well. Who knows? He didn't see that form, but who knows? And very excited about it. Well, the powers that be that were in that lifetime wanted him to keep his mouth shut, because there are people that don't want humanity to know that
Mm.
they are the creators of their reality, that all the power is in their hands to change their life. Believe me, there are people who don't want you to know that.
Yeah.
And so in that lifetime, he was told to shut up, and
Mm.
he refused. He was trying to stay true to himself. He refused. And so he was arrested and put on a rack. They would stretch you,
Oh.
right? They'd tie your hands and feet to different locations, and they would stretch you until your back broke.
Mm.
And when his back was almost broken, he relented and said, okay, I won't talk about it anymore. And so they let him off the rack, and he was extremely damaged, but he was still alive.
Mm.
And he died in that lifetime full of shame and misery because he wasn't able to honor his teacher and teach the principles like he had wanted to. So I don't know if you know what has happened to Joe Dispenza in this lifetime. He was a chiropractor, which is kind of ironic, right? And he was also doing spiritual work, I mean, at that time, this is way back when. I mean, he's basically the same age as I am, maybe a little younger, but basically the same age, where he's getting this concept that you create your own reality and, all of the kinds of things that I talk about.
Mm.
And he's in a terrible accident. I don't know if it was a car accident or what, but he's in this terrible accident. And he's in this body cast, and he is told that he will never walk again. Do you
Mm.
see the karma coming
Yeah.
through?
Mm.
He's told that he will never walk again. And so he decides to heal himself through the power of belief. And it took months and months. And he had a lot of kind of new age metaphysical friends, and he told them, you have to help me keep a positive mind. And so through the power of belief, now Joe Dispenza is another one that's a very, very self-empowered human being, self-determined. He was able to get out of that body cast and heal,
Mm.
so that he didn't even have any crippling or deformity or anything.
Mm.
And then from that, he began to teach people the information that he had begun to teach them in that past lifetime, that he was now completely free. This is how karma works. Major life's lesson
Yeah.
revolve around karma.
Mm.
So I'm going to tell you about one other lifetime. This will be the last one. So you don't have to alter your state of consciousness and go into trance to do this. It can come to you through other ways. It can come to you through movies, through documentaries, or through novels. And I've had past lives come to me through novels. This particular past life I'm going to tell you about came to me through a documentary. So I live in Humboldt County, and after the Vietnam War, a lot of Hmong people from Vietnam immigrated here. And it was actually a little documentary video that was made locally about a shaman that came here, immigrated from Vietnam. I guess Vietnam was, war torn, and they were all impoverished. And this Humboldt County gave them asylum, provided them with places to live and so forth. So anyway, there was a documentary made, and this man who had been a shaman in Vietnam, he was worried about his children because his children were growing up in a world that he didn't understand, where they didn't seem to have the same values that he had. You know how it is when immigrants come over and they have kids, and the kids, like, they don't know what their parents are talking about, and this guy's doing these rituals and all this stuff, and he was so worried about them, but he didn't know which one was having the problem. He was just really heartsick. And so he did this ritual, which I thought was really interesting. He had a bunch of different beans in a jar. They were different kinds of beans, like kidney beans and white beans, and he had each of his family members pick a bean,
Mm.
and they were all different so that they were recognizable, like you've got the kidney bean, you've got the pinto bean, and so forth and so on. And he picked a bean, and his wife picked a bean, and he put these beans together kind of in a lump on a table. And then he sat down with his drum near the table and began to beat the drum. And through the vibration of the music of the drum, the beating of the drum, those beans began to dance around. You
Mm.
know how it would be,
Yeah.
little vibration dancing around.
Mm.
The beans started to drop off the table one by one, and the last bean would belong to the person who had the problem.
Mm.
And so, and this ritual took hours. You can imagine how long it would take. And he's sitting there drumming and drumming and drumming, and all the beans are dropping off. And there's only one bean left, and it was his. That's when I saw it. I saw myself as being a shaman in an African tribe. We were all kidnapped and put on a boat to be taken to the New World and sold. And as the shaman of that tribe, I was so heartsick because they had looked to me during their lives to be the healer, and there was nothing I could do. And what happened for him, and so the guy in the documentary, having nothing to do with me, but having the guy in the documentary, is he was heartsick because his children weren't growing up to understand the ancient ways. They didn't have that incredible connection with nature that he had and that his ancestors had in Vietnam. He saw them being frivolous and shallow as, American teenagers are. And what he realized that his children had successfully inculturated in America, that they were going to be fine, but that he had to heal himself. So I told you that past lifetime for you to realize that past lifetimes something will trigger them. If when you're thinking, I'm always thinking about reality creation. I was learning constantly, I was memorizing, I haven't stopped thinking about this since I learned about it. I'd done quite a bit of past life work, and it was like, there it is, right in front of my face. Something triggered me
Mm.
into remembering that. And I've often had kind of heart sickness because once you know the truth and once you see how reality creation works and you see that everyone is asleep, it's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I am looking forward to doing that type of work because I mean it's necessary to connect everything together, I feel like, and just to know where things come from and to heal so you don't keep repeating that cycle over and over again.
exactly.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you just keep repeating it over and over again. Nothing changes until you do.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you have to heal consciously because the steps to getting there are the qualities of being there.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have to develop the personal power to heal yourself if you're going to step into the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is an information field holding a specific vibration, and you have to be able to hold that vibration yourself. I know this is esoteric work, but if you're ready for it,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
after it.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in learning that. And plus, like, it's just kind of a way to learn more about different cultures as well because you've lived through them in another lifetime.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is incredibly powerful work.
Hmm.
Can
Yeah.
change your whole life in the twinkling of an eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 I was planning, I'm, my goal is to go actually to a Joe Dispenza retreat this
Mhm.
year.
Cool.
I don't know when he releases the dates. I know he has April's out. I don't know the dates after that, but I really want to go to one of those retreats. I want to push myself and I've never even traveled without a parent or a supervisor before, you know,
Mhm.
so that would be something really exciting and new for me, which I want to really push myself and do.
Definitely. When I started seeing Lazaris, I was kind of the same way. I get easily lost and I'm not very adventurous and
Yeah.
I've been kind of introverted all my life and it was like traveling from where I live to San Francisco and getting a hotel room and doing that whole thing. That was all brand new to me.
Yeah, and San Francisco is crazy. I mean, I go
Yeah,
there not all the time, but I've been there a handful of times, and it's not easy to drive if you're not used to that.
daunting. I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, I hope you enjoyed, and then, do you know what we'll be learning about next week? I think you mentioned it earlier.
I am planning on teaching a class on global karma because
Okay.
we not only have our individual karma,
Mhm.
the whole globe has
Yeah,
its karma
yeah,
that humanity is trying to work through.
yeah, and like you said, I mean, I feel like we could be like, we're all courted to someone in a way or another, and it's like everybody's connected in one way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are all connected.
Well, I'm very excited to be learning that next week, and I hope everyone enjoyed this video today. And then we will see you back here in 2 weeks.
All right.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you for watching.